Now I request Dr. C.S. Swati ma'am to introduce our next esteemed guest. After a wonderful lecture, I think we are going to have another delicious feast before us, with another guest. It's my privilege to introduce our versatile guest, Mr. Sajjad Shahid. Generally, like any person will be portraying himself in one field, but his CV runs in different number of pages, and we can see like by profession he is a civil engineer, but by nature he is a heritage activist. And he shows his interest in history, culture, art, and architecture. So all his CV is related to the architecture. Naturally, like being by profession an engineer, he can connect himself to the architecture. He has played an instrumental role in a number of conservation projects and has served on various committees as an expert on culture, heritage, and urban history. Not only this, he is also a prolific writer, and his columns and articles are published regularly in leading newspapers and journals. He lectures extensively on heritage and culture to heterogenic audience and is presently a visiting professor at the Study India program of the University of Hyderabad, where he teaches a course on Islamic culture, art, and architecture of Hyderabad and the Deccan. Mr. Shahid has been a member of Academic Senate of the Osmania University. He was appointed co-chairman of the Managing Committee for the World Monetary Fund Grant Project for the restoration of Osmania University College for Women in 2003 and served as the director of the project. He was also a member of the advisory committee constituted in 2006 for restoration of the vision of Osmania Museum. So you can see like his interest and his active participation. In fact, like he was also a member in various trusts where he has been contributing a lot in restoring the architecture of those buildings. Thanks a lot, sir, for coming to today, and I request you to address the gathering.
आदाब अरसे Hyderabadi, Dakkani, and that is why, although I'll be speaking in English, I have this habit of, taking recourse to Urdu and Dakkani, because one of the great poets of Dakkani from this region, after the fall of Golconda and Bijapur, they were very troubling times, and well-meaning people advise a lot of these poets and literateurs of that period to switch over to an idiom which was understood and appreciated by the Mughals. Some of them did, some of them even taught Urdu to North Indians, which people tend to forget. But there were a few who refused. And that is why I honor and respect them. One of them was Hashmi. He was, in desperate times, had nothing to eat, and he was given a job in present-day Chennai, Madras then. Some governor of the Mughals, he was asked to write poetry in the Persianized idiom. Even in those trying times, he put his foot down firmly and said, "Tujhe chakari kya tu apnich bol, tera sher dakni hai, daknich bol." हाशमी मरते मर गया लेकिन दखनी नहीं छोड़ा, तो मेरे लिए भी ये मुश्किल हो जाता है ऐसे लोगों की बातें सुनने के बाद कि बगैर इस ज़बान का सहारा लिए आगे बढ़ो. Before I start, there are a couple of things. As Anu said, we have been associated for a long time, and I will not divulge how many years we have been working together. We've been going around town documenting the architecture of Hyderabad, and we used to have a very popular program, annual program of presenting awards to heritage structures. And as part of that, we have had a lot of adventures. We have been chased by dogs, by some people who were worse than the dogs. And we have been welcomed by people where we least expected. We have had the run of the city for, I think, 25 years. We had that program on, and for 25 years, she was the person who was doing the real docket. मैं तो कहानियाँ बोलता था, किस्से कहानियाँ. I used to listen to people, write them down, and make what used to call a citation and present it before the public. But she did the real work of photographing, of getting permissions from the most difficult officials, including the army. So that was a pretty adventurous part of working with her and with Intact. Well, she was talking about fossils in the botanical garden. We are on the verge of being declared fossils ourselves, so we tend to forget things. So a couple of things that she, I think, skipped was, one was she had been told about the family's connection, her ancestors' connection with the city. One thing I think everyone missed out was that one of her uncles was also the acting vice chancellor of Osmania. You must have forgotten, but I remember. Umapati Sahab, Raja Sahab Domkunda, was for a period of time, as he was a senior HCS officer, later IS officer. So he was the acting vice chancellor of Osmania also. So there are a lot of multiple connections with the university. My parents were both products of this university. My mother retired as head of the Urdu department here. So I have Osmania University in my blood. She spoke about Chanda, a lot of things, you know. Those were the days of innocence, where you didn't need to declare your love on monuments. You did that through poetry. And this lady was remarkable. She rose from being the daughter of courtesan to herself becoming a courtesan and one of the most highly respected. She was counted among the nobility of Hyderabad. And she was very able in negotiating, because she was made the negotiator to get the release of the Prime Minister of Hyderabad, who was caught in battle and imprisoned by the Marathas, Arastuja, if I remember correctly. And she negotiated the release. So she, on that level, she was an ambassador for Hyderabad. A remarkable lady who was a very great poet. But the fact was, from my research that I did when I was restoring the Chanda's tomb, at least half of Hyderabad was madly in love with her. From the Prime Minister down to a poet who was living off her grant. And this guy, I think, while Anuradha was mentioning, I tried to recollect from memory. There may be some mistakes here. He has written what is called a Musaddas, a long poem describing Jinda. Even the Prime Minister has written a very beautiful sarapa, a head to toe. That is a genre in Urdu poetry, Persian poetry also. He has written in words. The Prime Minister of Hyderabad wrote a sarapa. Nimbalkar was one of her admirers. You name it. Sikandar Jah. Everyone, you know. Sher Mohammad Khan said, Laila ka ek nakha, yahan kis khatar mein? Laila, poor Laila had only one. Look at how many are standing in line here. तो चंदा के बारे में जो उसने लिखा है, मैं समझता हूँ एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी लाइंस हैं शेर मोहम्मद खान. मैं जब से उसके हुस्न का दीवाना हो गया, वीराना दिल का रश के परी खाना हो गया, अज़बस शराब शौक़ से बेगाना हो गया, आलम के बीच क़िस्सा व अफसाना हो गया. ये हाल हुआ शेर मोहम्मद खान. और आखिरी का पंच लाइन सुनिए. चर्चा जो मेरे इश्क का जंगल में चल पड़ा, जानों पे हाथ मार के मजनू उछल पड़ा. मजनू जो पागल दीवाना घूम रहा था, उन्हें बोला ये चैलेंजर कहाँ से आ गया मेरा. So that is the sort of response that Chanda evoked. known for her poetry, for her architecture. Maulali, you have the pavilion, you have her garden, the tomb that she constructed for her mother. You have numerous structures. You have the step well. There was supposed to be some houses here. I think part of a house is still there in the Daratul Marif area. There is an Ashur Khana in the old city. Most importantly, her two major properties at Nampalli and at Dikmed both have educational institutions on them. Nampalli Girls' School and then Usman University. So that was the legend of the great Chanda. And I think we should be privileged to have, to be fortunate enough to attend the Usman University, which is located on 1,400 acres of Chanda's Jagir. Well, let's take a look at how the university came about, the history part, and then the architecture part of it, and why it is important. Before 1857, there was hardly any formal education in India. The famous Macaulay's Minute, where he says that English is the only language which can bring these people together and for us to be able to make some sense, drill some sense into them. But then in 1857, the Universities Act, 3 acts were passed by the then British Indian government, and universities were established in Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras. Then from 1857 to 1915, we had only 5 more universities that came up. On most of these, all of these were affiliating and examining universities, meaning that they didn't impart education, they didn't hold classes. So that was the point. In 1913, there was a change in policy, and the government of India that passed a resolution that the restriction on restricting the affiliation and asking universities to start teaching. And thereafter, we find a lot of regional universities and universities in other parts of India coming up in quick succession. So this was also the time when universities outside, modern education universities outside, the British controlled or directly administered territories started coming up. Although the movement started everywhere at the same time, Mysore was the first. They established a university in 1960 by an act of the state legislature of Mysore state. Usman University, of course, the process started. It took a long time, and finally in 1918, we had the promulgation of the final order establishing the university. Interestingly, Usmania was the only university at that time, and I think for a long time, even now I'm not sure whether there's any university in India which provides education of all across the board, sciences, medicine, engineering, in our vernacular language. So Usmania was the only university that took up that challenge. And not surprisingly, that the British felt very bad about it. Not just about Hyderabad, because Hyderabad was always under the keen observation and microscopic glare of the British, because they always thought, this being the largest state, something fishy was happening here. And I think there was reason for them to believe that too, because not just the Nizams, but their administrators were also, very apt at taking their chances against the British whenever there was an opportunity. So it came as a surprise to the British. They said that we didn't know that the Nizam had plans of establishing a university at all. But the major concern was the fact that this university was in the vernacular medium and not the English medium. So we have this whole lot of correspondence. If you look at that, you'll find that Hyderabad was to just justify that, okay, we are not doing away with English education. The Nizam College is still there. It will still continue to be affiliated to the Madras University. And this university is, to supplement and not to challenge or to supplant, as they said, the English medium Nizam College. So on 21st of April, 1917, we have this famous order issued from the King Koti. Actually, 21st April, the proposal was sent to the Nizam, and within 5 days, 26th of April, you have this initial order which says permission is granted to start the process of establishing a university. And finally, on 22nd of September, 1918, 22nd was yesterday, and we were supposed to have this lecture on 22nd, it was postponed by a day. Final promulgation of the order establishing the university came about. Now what happened? What was the reaction all over India? There were, very enthusiastic reaction from the Indian side. The British were very apprehensive about things, but one of the first letters of commendation, of appreciation comes from Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. In a letter dated 9 January 18, very early, even before the university had finally took final shape, he writes to Akbar Hydari in a letter in which he says, I have long been waiting for the day when, freed from the shackle of foreign language, our education becomes naturally available to all our people. It is a problem for the solution of which we look to your native states. And it gives me great joy to know that your state proposes to found a university in which instruction are to be given through the medium of Urdu. It is needless to say that your scheme has my fullest approbation, especially as I know that your example will be of great help to those outside your state who cry in the wilderness, despised by the prudent. Even 25 years later, in 1944, Silver Jubilee convocation of the Osman University. Incidentally, it's a very interesting document. It was so interesting, and I found so much material here regarding Osmania, and a short note that I had copies of it printed at the centenary celebrations when we had the function in the city. Unfortunately, I have very few copies. I have one copy which I printed, sir. I'll give it to you. It's the convocation address of C. Rajagopalachari, who at one time was the Governor General of India. He stresses on various points, and this is what he says. There is no university that has made Hindi as such the medium of instruction, qualifying for degrees in sciences and humanities. Hyderabad has rendered signal service to the lingua franca of India, and by its bold and successful experiment, in Urdu. So the establishment of the university gave a boost to higher education in the state, and within the first few decades, Hyderabad had produced a number of scholars, renowned scholars in all fields of learning. This achievement of the Osman University is acknowledged in the Silver Jubilee convocation that I mentioned by C. Rajagopalachari, where he is both appreciative of Osmania's achievements and critical that this successful experiment has not been replicated at other places. Because no other, even though Andhra University, Mysore University and various other universities had come up which were outside the British control as such, nowhere was a language, either Telugu, Kannada or Hindi or any language. All of them were English medium. So Rajaji claims that the Osman University is unique because every other university throughout India uses the English language, and from what one can see has no intention of using any other medium within a measurable distance of time. And he says that yours then is the true Vidyapeeth, the Swadeshi University of India. That was the, general reaction of people to the Osman University. And that is why Osmania and its option to start in a vernacular language is very important. Initially, the university was housed in a number of buildings in what is now the Abids Gun Foundry in Nampalli area, that triangle, in various buildings. I was reading recently the reminiscence of an old Usmanian, Zafrul Hasan, where he describes the life at the boys' hostel, which, according to him, was situated where you have the Gun Foundry State Bank. So the need for a permanent place, a suitable place, which would take care to the needs of this growing university were to be identified. And as Anu said, a lot of people were asked to suggest places. Various suggestions were made, but finally, Adik made, because apart from being, all the reasons that Anu gave, I think it was the only place where you had 1,400 acres available at that time, close to the city. And there was also this established link between the city and the university, because the railway line passed just behind the Arts College. On the other side, Jamia Osmania station was there. And of course, a spur had been laid to bring material to the university those days. So that is how this site was chosen and work began. I don't believe we have 1,400 acres now, and from that quite a few other institutions have benefited. But originally that was the extent of the land. On 5th of July 1934, now we come to the Arts College. Why this building is very important. University had started a long time, 20 years down the line, 15, 20 years. You have this desire to have a representative example of architecture. Architecture, as you know, is the most immediately apparent manifestation of our past, of a society and its aspirations. Everything is manifest, good and bad, both are manifest in monumental buildings. A building need not be necessarily beautiful. That's why, architectural historians say that the most ugly building or structure, which tells a story, is far, far more important for protection and preservation and understanding than the most beautiful structure which has no story to tell. So that is why architecture is important. And you find that the aspirations, the feelings, the emotion, the culture, the society, everything is reflected in the architecture of the times. That you find in the city of Hyderabad. I'll show you some photographs, but then more importantly, that is why you have a conscious effort at grabbing the essence of society of that time and trying to manifest it in the building, as was done by the architect of the Arts College. So 1934, the foundation is laid. I see the images somewhere here also of this. This is the pan and the trowel that was used by His Exalted Highness the Nizam, the 7th Nizam, Nawab Mir Usman Ali Khan Bahadur, when he laid the foundation stone. They are on display at the Nizam's Museum in Purani Haveli. Do go there and have a look. There's also a very beautiful model, a silver model, which I'll show you a figure later, which I believe was displayed during the centenary celebrations here also. You can have a look at that also there. And a lot of other things connected with the Nizam's rule, with Hyderabad city and state. Now, what was the thought of the Nizam when he ordered Osmania building, formation of the university, and of course, the structure of the university? He is on record at the inaugural function as having said, I am not quoting this exactly, I am not sure, but you can get the gist from the lecture. The most glorious structure of my time, that is what he called the Osmania University Arts College. And he said, it will be a lasting memorial of my rule. So this is what. So what was he trying to achieve? What he was, You know, anytime you construct a building, you give what is called an architectural brief to the architect. So this is what I want. This is what I like. And based on that, the architect, again, using, of course, his own creative talent, he gives shape to your dreams and to your desires. And that is what Jasper was doing. So basically, the dream and desire was that of H.E.H. the Nizam. Of course, the manifestation was brought about by Ernest Jasper, the Belgian architect, who was given the, charged with producing a suitable design. So 1939, 4th of December, we have the inaugural function. This is a photograph of the Nizam being welcomed to the site, and this is a panoramic view of the site. It must have been just opposite the Arts College now, where this function took place. This is the silver model, which is in the Nizam's museum. Please go and have a look at it in the Purani Haveli. You have to explore the city and what it offers, because that is how you will get a feel of history, as Anuradha was telling you. Do look at that. There's a small city museum there which tells you about how the city has evolved and developed. A lot of facts about the city can be had there. So, what did the Nizam want? He wanted the best of facilities available for the students, for the benefit of the masses. He charged 2 senior engineers from his reign, Zaini Arjang and Sayyid Ali Raza, to go on a world tour, study architecture with the object of, observing and then choosing a most appropriate plan, layout, design. And they were also asked to be on the lookout for a suitable architect who can put this dream into reality. And that is where when they were coming on the return, they were fully aware that it had to be, because it was a vernacular medium university, it had to reflect the architectural history and evolution of the East and not the West. The tour, of course, they went all over the world. Sir Ras Masood, the first principal of Arts College, was sent to Japan. These two went to Europe. Various, the whole list of universities is given. America. Then they went to the Middle East. And in Egypt, they came across this architect, Ernest Jasper, who was at that time engaged in constructing some structures at Al-Azhar universities and various other places in Egypt. They liked what they saw. Then they felt that he understood the concept of Eastern educational architecture that was desired by the Nizam. And there he was invited to come to Hyderabad. When he came, he was taken around the state, shown various heritages. He was taken to Warangal, city, of course, headed. Then he went into Bidar, Gulbarga, Ajanta, Ellora, and finally he was taken to North India and shown Mughal architecture, Delhi and Agra. And then he was, asked to present his plan. And he was borrowing from that. When you need continuity, you look at the past and you plan the future. So he looked at all these beautiful buildings, and then he also had in mind the Nizam's desire to showcase the remarkable cultural synthesis that had been achieved in the Deccan, and especially in Hyderabad state, in Hyderabad. And that is what was desirable. It was desirable to have that manifest in the building that was being created, because university, the Osmania University is huge now. You have, I don't know, number of departments, but the Arts College building is synonymous with Osmania University. Whenever you want, if you just show an image of Taj Mahal, everyone will know, oh, India. That is how, when you show an image of the Arts College, everyone calls it the Osmania University. Very few, come down telling that, oh, this is the Arts College of Osmania University. The identity of the Osmania University rests in the Arts College building. There is no two, so you should be privileged that you are students who are enrolled and will be studying at least for the 2 years, if not more, if you pursue further research and other interests here. For 2 years, you'll be here in this very historic building, which is the essence of what this beautiful, singular structure brings about. This ethos, this tradition of syncretism and synthesis in the Deccan and in Hyderabad. So what was Jasper looking at? He must have looked at Charminar, the Qutub Shahi structures there, the city. He must have looked at other structures around the city, the Sheikh Sarai, where you have early attempts of bringing about synthesis in temple architecture and Islamic architecture, local Deccan architecture. Later examples of use of dressed granite, which was a local art. Kakatiyan and Vijayanagar, Hampi, the stone masonry was very famous. Warangal, you have some of the most beautiful examples of carvings. And believe me, I rate them higher than Mughal architecture and Mughal carving, because it's easy to carve out intricate patterns in marble or red sandstone, which are soft material. It's really tough to carve something in granite. And just as an aside, the architects and the builders and even His Highness were very particular about not wasting money. So wherever possible, they try to recreate. If you look at the railings of the Arts College, they are not stone. They appear to look like stone, but they are actually cement RCC material railings. Now only some of them are deteriorating, so now people have come to realize that these are not stone. But they were matched so beautifully that the exterior pink granite and the concrete, you cannot notice the difference between the two. Of course, Jasper would have been taken to the Qutub Shahi tombs, where you have this beautiful example of synthesis. Early stages, Ibrahim's tomb, you have black basalt usage for borders. By Muhammad Khuli, you have the whole entrance in the trabeated style, which is the post and lintel construction, which is typical of Kakatiyan and Vijayanagar temple architecture. That being not only coming into vogue, but also being used as a focal point, the central point of the structure. Of course, the various tombs in the Qutub Shahi complex, the Sheikh Sarai on Jubilee Hills, temple architecture, pandals, mandapas. This is from Sitaram Bagh Temple. And also early attempts at synthesis, at bringing two diverse. Some people thought that it was impossible to bring Islamic architecture and the temple architecture, especially that of South India, together harmoniously. They thought they cannot gel. The finest example, of course, is the Arts College, where everything gels. It creates a beautiful statement. But how did this? Did not happen overnight. Jasper did not create it. It was already there. The process of achieving this synthesis by combining these two diverse architectural styles had been going on for ages. And you see, embodiments of that very conscious effort at bringing together these two diverse cultures, which was happening everywhere in all art forms, in painting, music, in architecture, in literature. You find this synthesis in Dakhni. If you look at Dakhni, one of the poets of Dakhni has, why speak in Dakhni? Persian was the language of the state. Dakhni, because you have to understand the other. And this was the lingua franca that had developed here. Hashmi says, मुए मुँह के वो क्या होंगे जिस मुझे उसे ये राब्ता है माँ अरबी फारसी दखनी तिलंगी और मराठी का. That those many languages he knew, the poet of the Deccan, and almost all of them did. One of the greatest Sanskrit poets of that period is Shah Raju's son, Akbar Hussaini, who is buried in the old city. His famous Sanskrit poetic creation, Sringara Manjari, has now been translated into Telugu. So you had this synthesis going on in literature. In Dakhini poetry, there is another couplet which you come across which says, why this creation and why this conscious and very careful creation? Rakhiya kam Sanskrit ke isme bol. I have kept the Sanskrit word to the minimum in my poetry. Rakhiya kam Sanskrit ke isme bol, adik bolne se rakhiya hu amol. Which makes it, it protects us from unnecessary verbosity. बेकार की बातें नहीं होती दखनी में. रखिया कम संस्कृत में के इसमें बोल, अधिक बोलने से रखिया हूँ अमोल, जिसे फारसी का न कुछ ज्ञान है, सो दखनी जबान उसको आसान है. Person who doesn't understand Persian or Sanskrit, for both of them, Dakhini is the language of mutual communication and understanding. So that you find here. यहाँ देखिए आप उस्मान यूनिवर्सिटी का जो आप आर्किटेक्चर देख रहे हैं, one of the first examples that you can, very clear examples, the same if you look at the right, the same pattern of trabeated temple style architecture in the Sitarambagh temple in first courtyard inside the view. And of course you have an ornately decorated arch and jharokas from Rajasthani architecture, because the family which constructed the upper portion and which redid the temple are from Rajasthan, so they have the Rajasthani style or Mughal Rajput style. So you have this blending here, and that is not the only place. You have that in various other buildings. Of course, he must have also, Jasper must have also looked at the buildings that represent contemporary buildings of his times, the town hall, the iconic Kachiguda station, because here I beg to differ from people who say that Jasper created a style, unique style. I think that credit goes to the other architect, Aish. Aish designed 5 buildings, iconic buildings for Hyderabad, and they laid the tone for even Usman University buildings, except for a slight attempt at going away from that in the Arts College building. All other buildings of the Usman University also had to again come back to the Aish pattern. Aish designed Kachiguda Station, City College, High Court, Osmania Hospital, and the Hyderabad Public School. And if you look at these 5 buildings, that is why I call them Osmanian buildings. These are pure Osman Ali Khan's concept. Even there, Aish did not have much to do. It was a conscious effort, conscious direction received from Usman Ali Khan, which led to the fabrication, which led to the creation of this unique style for Hyderabad. So CIB architecture, some people call it Qutub Shahi revival. It is nothing. The only true definition of that architecture is Osmanian architecture. And these 5 buildings, if you look at them, and then you look at what other architects and engineers of Hyderabad created. The Jubilee Hall, the State Archaeology Museum, the Mahbubia Town Hall. You look at any building, you find the same architecture being repeated. The Unani Hospital, everywhere you have this Osmanian style, which was, first brought in by Aish. And under the direct, I have written a whole article on why and how I think that it was His Highness Mir Usman Ali Khan was directly responsible for creation of that architectural style and not the architect himself alone. Anyway, I am digressing. He must have looked at dressed granite structures of Hyderabad like Mahbubia. He was taken to Warangal. He must have seen the temple architecture there and being inspired by temple architecture of Warangal, the Ramappa temple, the Warangal fort. He went to Bidar. He must have seen Mahmud Gawa's Madarsa, one of the oldest institution of learning here, the structure of which has survived. He must have seen the Gulbarga Jami Masjid, again unique architectural style. Then he would have tried to bring this together, and for that I give you a brief hint on what it is. This is what is called a trabeated construction, post and lintel. This is typical. Indian construction style, because the arch was not there in India. Dynamic arch, true arch was not available in India. It was only a simulated arch. Arch which did not function like an arch. Arch transfers the load in a curvilinear manner, but post and lintel is direct distribution of load. This was the system which was used in India, or a simulated system, and this was what was brought in by the introduction of Islamic architecture. This is called dynamic architecture, where the force moves in an arch and is transferred. So these were the two systems. It was not just a question of bringing architecture together. It was a question of bringing two very diverse and different technologies together and creating unique architecture. And this is what happened in India early. They tried to replicate the arch, but they did not have the expertise to construct a true arch. So what they did was what is called a corbelling, and then smoothing out the inner curves so that you have an arch shape. So these were the three types that were there in India. Now you have examples of the same broad theme of trabeated and arcuated, superimposed one on top of the other or one beside the other. But you also have instances where they come together. This is Bijapur, where you have this beautiful coming together of technologies of temple architecture and temple construction and Islamic architectural traditions. You can see the arches, you can see the lintel design, post and lintel, all those are there. And this is the trabeated, the simulated arch. It's not an arch. Vijayanagar, the technology came a little later. This is the Lotus Mahal of Vijayanagar. You have the arch, but it is not a true arch. It's not a dynamic arch. You also have the arch represented in Buddhist architecture. You have Ellora. You have an arch above a post and lintel. Of course, this must have been a major influence on Jasper when he was looking at architecture. You have simulated arches and domes in Vijayanagar, the so-called elephant stables of Hampi. Then you have a parallel where people are not bothered about architecture being either Hindu or Islamic, Indian or Islamic. Architecture for architecture's sake, art for art's sake. I like something, it is beautiful. If I feel it beautiful, I think it is beautiful enough to be used to create a temple, a place where my deity resides. And this was happening in society too. By this time we had syncretic worship traditions in the Deccan also. You still have that in Bidar and some other areas of Karnataka. People were thinking on those terms. People were speaking out. It was not a forced, acceptance. It was a willing acceptance of the other. That is what was happening in the Deccan. And that is manifest in the architecture and in poetry. Sufism was on a high. Mystic traditions were being, mystic exchanges were taking place. Raja Sahib Domkunda, one of her ancestors, relatives, the greatest scholar of Persian that Hyderabad has produced, is not a Persian, is not a person from North India, is not a Muslim who came with Arabic and Persian knowledge. It is a Telugu Vidda, the Raja Sahib of Domkunda. He was a great poet. He also wrote poetry in Urdu. His Takhallus, naam di poesy, was Asghar. In Domkunda, if you enter the fort, you have his house still there with the name of the building, Asghar Manzil, written in Urdu on top. And what did Asghar do? Asghar wrote very beautiful Sufi poetry, where there is no Allah, there is no Bhagwan, everything is Allah and everything is Bhagwan. That was what was happening at that time. जिधर मैं देखता हूँ उस तरफ ऐ जाने जा तू है. जाने जा here is the love for the divine. जिधर मैं देखता हूँ उस तरफ ऐ जाने जा तू है. हरी में दिल में साकिन है, मकीने लामका तू है. You are in the innermost chamber of my heart. This is Raja Sahab, her ancestor, Raja Sahab of Domkonda. जिधर मैं देखता हूँ उस तरफ है जाने जा तू है. हरी में दिल में साकिन है, मकीने लामका तू है. ब्राह्मण दैर को जाए, neither will the Brahmin go to the temple, न जाए शेख काबे को, neither will the sheikh go to the Kaaba. ब्राह्मण दैर को जाए, न जाए शेख काबे को. आया उन पर जो हो जाए कि हर दिल में निहायत तू है. You live in every heart. There is no need to go to the temple or the Kaaba. You are there in every heart. That is her ancestor, Raja Sahab, Rajeshwar Rao Asghar of Domkonda. So this is what Hyderabad was. And you have this temple in Humnabad. The architecture, of course, will, if you define it, will have to be classified as Islamic. And so also the Tuljapur temple gate, the arches, and so you cannot define things as Islamic or Hindu or temple. This is a synthesis which was achieved in the Deccan, and the synthesis was so great that all these barriers were erased. And of course, the most closest example of Arts College architecture that I have come across is the courtyard of the Jama Masjid of Bijapur. You can see the same trabeated style on the bottom, the same arches on top. Exact replica of what is happening at Arts College. So it was not something which came suddenly, something which came out of the blue. We have a long history of this synthesis in the Deccan. I think I've taken a lot of time. I'll conclude with the Arts College. Structural system. There's an erroneous belief that Arts College is a lime mortar building of stone and nothing else. Nothing can be far from that. Of course, the facade is totally stone, but many of its parts are in RCC, and that was the greatness of architects of that period. Ernest Jasper and Esch, both were contemporary architects trying to revive traditional architecture through the medium of modern technology and modern materials that were available. You should understand that by the time the Arts College was being constructed, we already had a cement factory in Shahabad. The Nizam's government had ensured that. Of course, it was set up by the Tatas, if I'm not wrong. It later became the ACC, Associated Cement Companies. So because of that cement there, and because of the apprehension of Hyderabadis, हमारे बचपन तक हमारे नानी दादी बोलते थे ये क्या सीमेंट घर रहते, गर्मी होती इसमें, गच्ची का घर रहना, चौड़े दीवार रहना. That was the concept. But it came slowly. So state patronage had to be provided for this new industries. The Nizam did it by ordering that all the roads in his dominions will be constructed in concrete. And then, of course, Pathargatti in the old city, the roof system is concrete, RCC. Here in Osmania, all the roofs and the dome, central dome, are reinforced concrete. ये देखिए आप construction photographs. This is the stationary crane. I'm not sure the mobile crane if it was used here, because I've gone through at least 1,000 photographs of the construction process and I didn't see that. Maybe I'll take a look again, because Anu says it may have been brought in later for the other buildings of Osmania. So this is how the construction took place. You can see the granite structure ready. The cavity is there. They will have RCC beams. You can see the RCC steel reinforcement in the beams. So you have stone on two sides and the RCC beam going. And the roof, of course, slab is again concrete. Very few people realize that, because they think it's only lime masonry and stone. Again, the corridors, the roof, if you look at the roof, this RCC roof. The arches being constructed. This is the dome construction, a very interesting method of creating the dome scaffolding here. And you see the entire dome structure, including the surrounding beams, which take the thrust of the dome, are all in reinforced concrete, steel is there. This is the casting process. This is the lower thing already cast. This is again the final casting. And this is the dome finished from inside. One of the most beautiful domes, I think, as far as decoration is concerned. And then, I think very rightfully, the Arts College has been called a symphony in stone. It's a beautiful structure. Show us, show the world, let us show the world, I should say, that we are worthy of such an extraordinary building, an extraordinary history and cultural embodiment that comes with it. Thank you.